Wow.
Angel Reese never expected that speaking out about WNBA salaries would turn into a massive controversy. What started as a simple conversation about fair pay quickly spiraled into a heated debate, drawing in sports analysts, fans, and even critics like Jason Whitlock. But this wasn't just about money. This was about respect, business, and the future of women's basketball. Reese believed she was making a valid point. The WNBA was gaining popularity, bringing in more fans than ever before, and yet player salaries remained shockingly low. Overseas leagues were offering better contracts, and even off-season tournaments were paying more than a full WNBA season. To her, something wasn't adding up. Then came Jason Whitlock, a man never afraid to speak his mind. And when he responded, he didn't just criticize Reese's stance, he destroyed it. He called her entitled, accused WNBA players of ignoring the league's financial struggles, and even suggested that they should be paying to play instead of asking for raises. But he didn't stop there. He took direct aim at Reese herself, making a comment that many saw as sexist and completely out of line. The backlash was immediate. Social media exploded, with fans and analysts taking sides. Some believed Reese was standing up for something important, while others argued that Whitlock was simply telling the hard truth. But the more people debated, the bigger the conversation got. What started as a salary discussion had now turned into something much bigger than basketball. The question wasn't just whether WNBA players deserved more pay. It was about whether the league was even in a position to afford it. It was about endorsements, economics, and the value of women's sports. Was Angel Reese fighting for a necessary change, or was she ignoring financial reality? Did Jason Whitlock expose an uncomfortable truth, or did he take things too far? And what does all of this mean for the future of the WNBA? One thing is certain, this conversation is far from over. Angel Reese had no idea that a simple statement about WNBA salaries would ignite one of the biggest controversies in women's basketball. She believed she was making a fair argument, one that players had voiced for years. But what she didn't expect was the firestorm that followed. And when Jason Whitlock entered the conversation, things escalated faster than anyone could have predicted. What started as a debate about fairness and opportunity quickly became personal, and before long, it wasn't just about salaries anymore. It was about respect, business, and the very future of women's basketball. Reese, a rising star in the WNBA, had been vocal about the pay gap between men and women in professional basketball. She wasn't the first to raise the issue, and she certainly wouldn't be the last. But this time something was different. The league was getting more attention than ever before. Caitlin Clark's record-breaking college performances had brought millions of new eyes to the sport. The WNBA draft had set viewership records. Merchandise was selling out. For Reese and many others, it felt like the perfect time to demand what they believed they had earned: a bigger paycheck. Her frustration wasn't just theoretical. She compared her WNBA salary to what players were making in overseas leagues, pointing out that women's basketball players in other countries often made far more than those playing in the United States. Then she made a shocking admission. The $50,000 bonus she had received from winning an off-season tournament was more than half of what she made playing an entire season in the WNBA. That statement alone was enough to set social media on fire. Fans debated whether she had a point or if she was just complaining too soon into her professional career. Some believed that Reese was exposing a real issue that had been ignored for too long, while others felt she was failing to understand the business side of the sport. But then came Jason Whitlock. And he didn't just disagree with Reese, he tore her argument apart. Whitlock, never one to shy away from controversy, labeled Reese's complaints as entitlement. To him, the numbers spoke for themselves. The WNBA, he pointed out, loses around $30 million every single year. It wasn't a profitable league. It wasn't raking in billions like the NBA. Instead, it was being propped up financially by the NBA, which helped cover many of the losses the league faced annually. His take was clear. If a business is losing that much money, how can its employees demand a pay raise? He framed it as a fundamental misunderstanding of economics, saying that WNBA players weren't just asking for more money, they were ignoring financial reality. Then he took it a step further. Whitlock made a comment that shocked even his biggest supporters. He claimed that instead of asking for raises, WNBA players should actually be paying to play. His argument was brutal. If the league was already losing money, then in any other business, The workers would either take pay cuts or be forced out completely. To him, the WNBA existed in a financial fantasy world. One where athletes were demanding pay raises in a league that was barely surviving. Those comments sent shockwaves through the sports world. Fans, players, and analysts all had something to say. Some backed Whitlock's take, arguing that business was business, and that players couldn't expect NBA salaries when the WNBA wasn't even close to making the same kind of money. Others saw his words as disrespectful, dismissing them as another example of someone belittling women's sports instead of working to build them up. But then Whitlock did something that turned this debate into something much bigger than basketball. He didn't just attack Reese's stance on salaries, he went after her personally. He mocked her social media presence, her public persona, and even her attitude. And then he made one of the most controversial comments of his career. "Hard for men to dislike a woman who puts her butt on display," he said, "but she's unlikable." That line set the internet on fire. Suddenly, this wasn't just a debate about business and salaries, it had turned into a full-blown gender controversy. Some people defended Whitlock, claiming that he was just calling out what they saw as Reese's manufactured public image. Others, however, saw his words for what they were, a direct, sexist attack on a female athlete. For Reese, this wasn't just about proving she was right anymore. It was about defending herself. She had gone from being a young WNBA player talking about fair pay to being the center of a controversy that was quickly spiraling out of control. The more people debated, the bigger the conversation got. And here's where things get even more complicated. Because while WNBA salaries are nowhere near NBA salaries, the reality is that many top female players make millions in endorsements. Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, and several other rising stars have already secured multi-million-dollar sponsorships with brands like Nike, Gatorade, and State Farm. That led to yet another twist in the debate. If players were already making millions through sponsorships, should the WNBA even raise salaries? Some argued that these deals more than made up for the pay gap, while others pointed out that not every WNBA player had access to the same lucrative endorsements. The controversy only grew from there. Social media was split down the middle. Some people felt that Reese was fighting for something important, a real investment in women's basketball. Others believed that Whitlock had a point, and that the league needed to become profitable before increasing salaries. And yet, despite all the arguments, the one thing that became impossible to ignore was that the WNBA was now getting more attention than ever before. The Reese versus Whitlock debate had drawn millions of eyes to the league. Whether fans were defending Reese or agreeing with Whitlock, one thing was certain: they were talking about women's basketball like never before. But this raises a much bigger question. If the WNBA wants to continue growing, it needs to figure out where it stands on salaries, endorsements, and long-term success. Does the league need to raise base salaries immediately, or should it wait until revenues catch up? Should top players like Reese and Clark be treated as the future of the sport, or are their sponsorship deals enough to justify keeping WNBA salaries low for now? There's no easy answer. And that's what makes this debate so explosive. Angel Reese might not have expected this level of backlash when she first spoke out. But now she's right in the middle of one of the biggest conversations in sports. Whether she ends up changing the WNBA forever or simply remains a controversial figure, one thing is certain: she's not backing down. And as for Jason Whitlock, love him.
And it was quote-unquote because of culture. Well, what happened to the culture?
Economics. Some see him as a necessary voice of reason, while others believe he's part of the very problem that's holding the WNBA back. So where do you stand? Does Angel Reese have a point, or is Whitlock exposing an uncomfortable truth? Should WNBA salaries go up, or is this just a reality of business? And what does this mean for the future of women's sports? One thing is clear: this conversation isn't ending anytime soon. The debate surrounding Angel Reese and Jason Whitlock isn't just about one player or one commentator. It's about something much bigger. It's about how women's sports are valued, how they're funded, and what the future of professional basketball looks like for female athletes. And while opinions on the matter remain deeply divided, one thing is undeniable: this controversy has forced an important conversation that won't be going away anytime soon. For years, WNBA players have argued that they deserve better pay. They've pointed to the growth of the league, the increase in viewership, and the rise in sponsorship deals as proof that the money is there and that it's simply not being distributed fairly. And on the surface, their argument makes sense. When you look at how much attention the WNBA is receiving, especially with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese bringing millions of new fans to the sport, it's hard to ignore the fact that women's basketball is experiencing a level of popularity it has never seen before. But popularity doesn't always translate into profitability. And that's where the other side of the argument comes in. Jason Whitlock and those who support his stance argue that while the WNBA might be growing, it still operates at a financial loss. They point out that the league is losing tens of millions of dollars each year and that without the NBA's financial support, the WNBA likely wouldn't be able to survive in its current state. They believe that while the push for higher salaries is understandable, it's also unrealistic given the current economics of the league. This creates an uncomfortable but important question. What should come first? Higher pay for WNBA players or the financial stability of the league? Should the WNBA increase salaries in hopes that it will drive even more interest and investment? Or should the league wait until it can stand on its own financially before making those changes? The conversations, the controversies, and the debates are all signs that people are paying attention. And that, more than anything, proves that the WNBA is on the verge of something big. But the question remains, what happens next? Will the league find a way to increase salaries and keep its biggest stars happy? Or will the financial realities of the business force WNBA players to accept the current pay structure for now? Will Angel Reese's fight for fair pay lead to real change? Or will it be seen as an overreach that doesn't align with the league's financial situation? And what about Jason Whitlock? His comments may have been harsh, but they've also sparked one of the biggest discussions in women's sports history. Was he simply exposing an uncomfortable truth, or was he using controversy to fuel his own brand? Only time will tell how this story unfolds. But one thing is certain, this debate is far from over. Women's basketball is growing, the WNBA is evolving, and the fight for fair pay is just getting started. Whether you agree with Angel Reese or side with Jason Whitlock, one thing is clear. The world is watching and the future of women's basketball is being shaped right now.